Hello, welcome to my channel. It's December 29th, 2022, and I have finished my year of reading, and I'm so proud of myself. My goal this year was to do videos just to hold myself accountable to read more. I hoped that maybe I would learn a little bit more about books, learn more about what I liked in books, what I didn't like, because up until this year I wasn't an avid reader. I'd read like 3 or 4 books a year. I really enjoyed books and I really enjoyed reading them, but I just never read a lot. And so last year I had watched all of these wrap-up videos for reading, and I was like, oh, I want to try that because maybe that'll make me read more. And it did, because this year I have my notes here. This year I read 56 books. 56 books. That's incredible for me. That is more books than I read 10 years prior to this. That's wild. So it totally worked. Let's begin. Again, I got my little notes. In January, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, Matilda, Recursion, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, The Prince and the Dressmaker, Persepolis, Fun Home, and Carrie. They both die at the end. One Night, Two Souls Went Walking. In April, I read The Bluest Eye, I Am Jazz, A Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo, George, Sourdough, Sadie, Mouse, and Upright Women Wanted. In May, I read How to Stop Time, In a Grove, Daisy Jones and the Six, Little, The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, Genderqueer, The Hate You Give. In June, I read Such a Fun Age, The House in the Cerulean Sea, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, The Midnight Library, and Coraline. In July, I read Crying in H Mart, The Dictionary of Lost Words, Kim Jong, born 1982, The Guide. In August, I read Maybe in Another Life, This Time Tomorrow, My Sister the Serial Killer, The Night Circus, and The Girl on the Train. In September, I read Under the Whispering Door, Pet, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, and I read all 6 volumes of Paper Girl. In October, I read Psalm for the Wild-Built, The Memory Police, and Project Hail Mary. November, No One Is Watching, and The First to Die at the End. And then finally this month, I read Clara and the Sun, Freshwater, and A Spindle Splintered. Those are all my books. 56 books. So I did learn a few things. One, I learned I hate hardcover books. I just hate them. I think they're too heavy. I hate the dust jacket. I hate that they do not decorate the cover under the dust jacket, that it's not pretty. I hate that they cost so much more money. I hate that you have to have one and you can't have a paperback if you want a new release. Hate hardcover books. The second thing I've learned is I still don't know what genre I enjoy the most. I know that I don't like horror and I don't like romance. 2 books that I never read this year. So maybe I do. I don't feel like I do. I've read books that had romance in them, which I enjoyed, but I don't think I like where romance is the central character, the central moving thing. And horror just, I don't like being scared. My most controversial opinion. One of the books I read this year is Crying in H Mart, and you won't see it on my top 11 books because I didn't really care for it. I could see in parts where there was true vulnerability, where there was just tenderness and sweetness, but I also felt like it was kind of disjointed. Sometimes during the book, I was like, wait, am I in the past or am I in the future or am I current? Because it flips back and forth so often. And something I didn't care for is just paragraphs of listed food. I understand that the book is about food and about her and her mother and their relationship through food, but I didn't need paragraphs of just listing dishes. I really appreciate in the book where she talks about comfort food. It doesn't need to be just fatty food. That doesn't need to be comfort food. That comfort food can be a food that you are comfortable with, that you know, that speaks to you. That language of food I appreciate very, very much. Listing dishes doesn't do a lot for me. I didn't care for it. I feel like I'm the only person But like, I didn't give it a bad rating, but I think it was like around a 3. I just didn't love the way it was told. Controversial opinion. Yikes. My biggest disappointing books. I have 2 of them. The first book that was incredibly disappointing was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I just expected it to be incredibly magical and just about a beautiful bookstore. I wanted some magical realism, which there was, but it just read as a self-help book, and I really did not like it. You were told how to feel at every turn. You were told how to interpret the story at every moment. So it lacked a lot of creativity, both on my part because of his writing and on his part because of his writing. The second one is The First to Die at the End. I did a whole video about this. It is the video right before this. I was so disappointed in this book. The First to Die at the End is said to be a prequel, but it isn't. There's nothing about Deathcast. There is nothing in the book that helps you understand the first book better. Complete disappointment. The second thing is what I think are the best audiobooks that I listened to this year. So number 3 is Daisy Jones and the Six. The book is broken up into sections of an interview. Each chapter is a different section. And so in the audiobook, each chapter is done by a different person. And it was just great. The story was okay. It was pretty good. Even now I'm forgetting it a little bit, so I don't know how wonderful the story was. It was good, but the audio version of it just helps so much. Number 2 is Little by Edward Carey. This book is about Madame Tussaud and her whole life. And it's told in the first person. And the person doing the voice in this book is just absolutely incredible. At first I was like, wait, is this going to be an irritating voice? And then I realized that after I learned a little bit more about this person, a little bit more about her life, I felt like the voice matched perfectly, and it just added so much to the story. And number 1 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Project Hail Mary is a science fiction where a man wakes up and doesn't have a memory. And so throughout the book, you are piecing things together with him. The audio, there is one particular thing in the book that requires really great sound engineering, and they just did an incredible book. I don't even know what this would look like in paper, because in audio it's so unique and interesting. So those are my 3 top picks for audiobooks. Now let's get to the top books that for me were just great this year. I loved them. And I have 11. I just couldn't kick one of them off the list. This is a top 11 list. Number 1, I want to say every single one of these books is just great. They go through different genres, so like maybe you don't like one of the genres, but you like one of the other ones. I loved all of these books. So at number 11, we have George. George is actually a kid's book, I would say middle grade, and it is about a transgender child named George who has not come out to anyone. Their school does a play every year, and it's Charlotte's Web. They do it for the younger kids. And George wants to play Charlotte. The whole book revolves around George knowing that she's a girl, and how does she convey that to the people around her? How does she come out to them? And she has a wonderful best friend who helps her figure out, number 1, how to play Charlotte in Charlotte's Web, but also how to feel accepted. And the last chapter of this book is just so incredible. It's so wonderful. I was crying, but nothing in this book paints an unrealistic portrait for a young transgendered child. It is just magnificent. Number 10 is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. So this is also supposed to be a child's book. I feel like it's mid-grade, higher adult. There's a lot in this book. So this book is set in a world where all of the monsters have been eradicated. They've all been gotten rid of. And Jam is a little kid living in this world. Jam and their best friend have discovered that there is a monster among them. And so one, they have to find the monster, and two, they have to get rid of it. And the adults are not too supportive because the adults have spent so much time getting rid of the monsters. And there is so much in this book around race and just there's a lot. This is another book that, even though it's supposed to be a kid's book, I recommend anyone read it. It's just a great book. Number 9 is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. This is a graphic novel that here in the United States was banned in one of the school districts here, which, brought a lot of attention to banning books. What the book is about is a man, Art Spiegelman, interviewing his father because his father and his mother both survived the Holocaust. And it is Art Spiegelman recounting his father's story. But the book is just so much more than that. It is about his father and his mother surviving the Holocaust and all the atrocities that happened and everything all the hardship that came with that. But it's about also how doing so shaped his father. And to a lesser extent, how his father's experience with that shaped Art Spiegelman. And it's just incredible. It was really great. And the idea that it was banned is just outrageous. Number 8 is Fun Home. This is by Alison Bechdel. This is an older graphic novel, and it is Alison Bechdel talking about her father and her relationship to her father. One, Alison Bechdel's vocabulary is enormous, and it shows in this book. I've never had to read a graphic novel with a dictionary right beside me, ever, but you have to in this book. But it's not off-putting. It's, if you want to just read, you can get what the words are through context, so if you don't want to look them up, you don't have to. Also, her writing is so good. So the way the story is told is she goes back in time, talks about her childhood with her father, and as a college student, and it toggles back and forth between these two times. So you learn something when she's a child, and you think you understand, you understand what happened. It goes back to when she was in college, and then it goes back to when she was a child at the same time, but now you learn more information. And that information affects the first thing that you learned. Now, what you thought you knew before may not be true. Maybe you're changing your mind a little bit. Then it goes back and forth. So by the end of the book, you get this clearer picture of her and her father as two separate people and as together in their relationship. It is just really great. I think about it often. I think about her writing often. It was a great graphic novel. Number 7, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book, I think, was popular last year or maybe the year before, so I'm new to this book. But I really loved it. It was very sweet, very kind. I often describe it as fluffy. I think that reading T.J. Klune's books for me is maybe the way reading romance is for other people. His writing is great. You fall in love with every single one of the characters. The story is just genuine and caring and thoughtful. There's nothing that stabs at you while you're reading the book. You just feel warm. You feel like you've got a blanket on, and you fall in love with every single person. And so I loved it. I loved The House in the Cerulean Sea. It's just great. I really enjoyed it. Number 6, Akwaeke Emezi, Fresh Water. I've just finished reading this book, and it made the list. First of all, Akwaeke Emezi is a superb writer. The way that they put together sentences or even thoughts, or the way they tell a story, is just absolutely magnificent. This, though, is a very rough story. It is about mental health and what does that mean, but it's also about gods and power and strength. There's a lot of trigger warnings. If you choose to read this book, I would look them up before you read them, because it is a very, very heavy book. But it is written so well. Number 5 is The Night Circus. This book is just magical. It is about a circus that just pops up out of nowhere. So the night before, there was no circus in this field. The next day, there's a circus, and it opens at midnight and it closes at dawn. Within the circus, there is a battle happening. The people attending the circus are unaware of this battle, and many of the people who are in the circus are unaware of this battle. And the battle is magical. The circus is magical. The story is magical. The writing is magical. Magic is the word for The Night Circus, and I loved it. I listened to this on audiobook. The person reading the book is just like this little cherry on top of this beautiful magic sundae, because his voice is just beautiful. It fits perfectly with the book. I just adored it. Number 4 is Little by Edward Carey. Little is, again, about the life of Madame Tussaud. She started from a very young age creating wax figurines. Her head was the first wax figure, and it is historical fiction, but it talks about her life in Paris, her life during the Revolution, and then going to London. And it's just great writing, but it's, a lot about family and found family and who do we trust and who do we not trust. I just really enjoyed the book so much. And it was so quirky. Like, the true meaning of quirky, I felt this book was in this book. Not like silly quirky, not like intentional quirkiness. She just existed as a quirky character, quirky human, and I loved it. Number 3, The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. I loved this book. So this is about Esme, who is a little girl living in Oxford, England, and her father is tasked with creating, her father and other men are tasked with creating the first Oxford English dictionary. And she, as a little girl, Esme as a little girl, would hide under the table while her father and the other men worked on the dictionary. And she saw that some words were being tossed out. So everybody in England and all over the world would send them words, and then they would decide which words got put into the dictionary and which words got left out. And so she would find these scraps of paper on the ground of words that they were throwing out. And most often they were words spoke by women, in particular women of a lower class. And so she started collecting the words, and it is about her life in collecting these words. Again, this is historical fiction. Pip Williams talks in the back about her research that she did for writing this book, but I love Esme. I love the story. It was just lovely. Number 2. This is another book that I just read and made the list. December had 2 on the list. Clara and the Sun by Kazu Ishiguro. Oh, this book is so interesting. I've had this book on my shelf for about 6 months now, and I must have gotten it knowing what it was about, but forgot. Because when I first started reading it, it is not what I expected. It's about a world where there are things called AFs. It is an artificial friend. This book is subtly dystopian. It is dystopian, but you have to work for it. Clara is an AF, and it is a story of her relationship and the little girl that buys her to be her AF. The little girl is sick, and so it is the story of an artificial friend and her sick friend. In order to find out some of the things that were happening, so in certain places in the book, it was a little bit confusing. And in order to get that explanation, it was just like one sentence a few chapters later. So if you weren't paying attention, you weren't going to understand that one thing. And I just loved it. I loved Clara. I loved Josie. I loved the whole crew. It's sad. It's magical. It's scary. I loved it. It was definitely worth number 2. Number 1, my top book for this year was The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. I love this book. This is about a little girl who self-sacrifices herself to the sea god in order to stop the storms that are happening to all of the villages around the sea. And this is something that they do every year. They sacrifice someone to the sea god to be the sea god's bride. And this is her journey through that world in sacrificing herself. There's this thing I think that happens with girl power books where the girl is just equally tough or equally strong or equally terrible to the men, and that's supposed to be equality, is the girl being able to be just as bad as the boys. Or it's a story about a girl who really struggles to be heard. She struggles so hard to be seen. She has to struggle 10 times more than the boys, and then she comes out in the end victorious. And when you're reading books like that, you are happy for her. You do find that she has courage, and you're happy that she comes out in the end victorious, but you also kind of wish she didn't have to go through all of that. And in this book, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, this world exists where women their voice is equal to men. This is the story of her, but she's not struggling to be heard. She's not struggling to be listened to. The other characters in the book listen to her and trust her, and because of that, she's able to be vulnerable. She's able to be sad. They're able to be vulnerable. They're able to be sad, and it's just the story. I just love the idea, one, of this magical world where there's a sea god and people are being sacrificed, and that's just the way it is. But then I also love that we live in a world where there is seemingly equity among people. And I don't know. I loved the book. I loved it. It was young adult, and it is fantasy, and it had everything that I wanted. I absolutely adored it. My favorite authors of the year: Akwaeke Emezi and TJ Klune. I feel like these are two more people who are very different from one another. Like, these are two ends of a spectrum. TJ Klune, the writing that he does is very sweet and kind and gentle, and you fall in love with all the characters. Akwaeke Emezi is a very sharp, poignant, incredibly direct, pokes you and makes you think and makes you move and makes you wiggle and makes you uncomfortable in incredibly good ways. And for me, these two authors offer something that I need in two very different ways. When I feel like I need that hug, when I feel like I need the softness, when I need to feel happy or loving, I can go to TJ Klune. When I feel like I need to be riled up, I need to be poked, I need to be shooken up, I need the way I think to be altered or challenged, then it's Akwaeke Emezi all the way. Those are my two favorite authors this year. I love both of them for very different reasons. Next year, in 2023, I only have one goal, and that is to read 50 pages a day of whatever I'm reading. I don't know if that's going to be a doable goal. If for some reason when I'm reading my 50 pages, it seems like it's ruining reading for me, I'm not going to do it anymore. But as much as I can, 50 pages a day, goal next year. Thank you all so much for being with me in 2022. It has been a lovely year of reading for me, and I will see you in 2023. Bye. Oh, like and subscribe.